Hello and welcome to Positive Parenting. I'm Deanne Conrad, Community Relations Supervisor for the Sioux Falls School District. Positive Parenting is a joint venture between the medical professionals of Sanford Health and the child development and education professionals of the Sioux Falls School District. So we thank you for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. Today our topic is the many challenges regarding the food that is served in our schools. There are lots of federal guidelines. We serve approximately 18,000 meals, snacks, and lunches each day. And among those, then, we work with families and children who need special diets. So it's a complex process where we are following rules for protein and calories and carbohydrates and all kinds of things like that. And then on top of that, trying to make it work for families and children who have special dietary needs. So we're talking about those details today and the challenges and the solutions that have come into play as we have learned the process of this very complex issue. We have guests joining us today, and I'll have each of them introduce themselves, and then our conversation will begin. So Joni, why don't you kick us off?
My name's Joni Davis, and I'm the Child Nutrition Supervisor for the Sioux Falls Public Schools.
Great.
And I am Jocelyn Johnson, and I'm a community education dietitian at Sanford Health.
So thank you both for joining us here today, and the conversation is very complex. Joni, you guys do just incredible work at Child Nutrition Services, understanding all the federal guidelines and the specifics about what needs to go into the majority of those 18,000 snacks, meals, that type of thing. And it's been regulated more heavily lately.
Yes, that would be correct.
Great. And so what are some of the specific things what does a regular meal consist of in terms of guidelines on calories and proteins and those kinds of things?
Mm-hmm. Well, with the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, that was put in place to be very specific to schools. We've always had a caloric range to work in, but now it's very specific based on age group. And with that, then, for that calorie consumption, what are the kinds of things that make up the meal? So the proteins or the meat alternates, fruits, vegetables, grains, grain alternates, and the milk product. And so our challenge is always to find the items that will fit and meet that requirement, as well as be enjoyable to our customers.
And Jocelyn, you, in being in dietary and such, really those federal regulations, it's things that we should be doing in our own home lives, and we're not necessarily doing them because we get lazy. What's easy isn't necessarily always what's healthy.
Right, exactly. And I know with the new guidelines, it's a lot of switching from processed grains to whole grains, and eating more of the dark green vegetables, the different colored vegetables, where I think definitely, at least in the Midwest, we kind of get stuck in a rut as far as what vegetables we eat. So, kind of trying to broaden the students' horizons a little bit too and get them to try new things. But exactly like you said, that's really what we should be doing at home too.
And on a daily basis.
Right.
Then, in a more specific way, there are students who have special needs in terms of their diets that need to be regulated very closely for their medical condition in order to keep that under control. What are some of the illnesses that require a special diet, that a student might come into the school district and have a specific need in terms of the food that they're eating on a regular basis?
Well, I think one of the diets or illnesses that's becoming a lot more common is gluten intolerance, or kids that have celiac disease, and that's a really tough diet to follow. You think that it would just be in grain type foods that have wheat, but like Joni can tell you, there's actually gluten in anything from salad dressings to seasonings and things like that, and so that can be a real challenge for the school and for the student to find things that they can eat safely, because there are a lot of really bad GI side effects that can come along with eating anything that even just has a dusting of gluten on it.
And that's becoming more prevalent.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one of those things, if it's not necessarily, getting more prevalent, we're just diagnosing it better, I think.
Sure.
Because it's a kind of gastrointestinal disorder, so many of those symptoms are hard to really pinpoint
Sure.
to a certain diagnosis, but
Sure.
it's definitely becoming more common, and parents and kids are finding that that's what really seems to make them feel better, is by just cutting out all of that gluten, and so we're
Sure.
just seeing that a lot more.
What else in terms of illnesses?
Type 1 diabetes, even sadly we have kids now that have type 2 diabetes, so just really, again, watching their carbohydrate intake, making sure they're eating carbohydrates on a regular basis, in adequate amounts, but then also choosing healthier forms of carbohydrate too, so they don't have those blood sugar
Spikes.
peaks and
Right.
lows. Right.
Right.
Yep.
So, Joni, some of those things, obviously, what's the process? How do we find out about students who have those special dietary needs? We want to make a special note that if your kid doesn't like peas, that's not what we're talking about here. Otherwise, there'd be special diets for all students. And, granted, we because of the federal guidelines, we have to serve a variety. We can't just serve, what your child loves. But what we're talking about here today are those critical issues that can cause some real serious problems if a student, it maybe even causes them to stay out of school or that type of thing. So these specific diets, these special diets, how many of those do we have, and what's the process for declaring a special diet?
Well, I would like everyone to know that based on federal as well as USDA guidance, all schools need to try to accommodate students who have a diagnosed disability that would impact life events, if you will, signed by a licensed physician is what is the criteria that we work with. And so with that, if that's coming in, we have a special diet form then that starts the process, because it does have the who's, the what the diagnosis is, what the foods to omit are, what the substitutions can be or should be, and signed by that individual. And once we receive that in our office, then we're able to implement that criteria with the meals that, as you mentioned, we do have to serve. The goal is to try to respect a student so that no one knows that they have a special diet is our goal. So we try to find foods that are very similar, but still we do have to prepare a diet that is as similar to the school lunch menu, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or snack, as possible. So sometimes that's a bit challenging, the items that we can choose and put in place to do that. And then we follow what the doctor has prescribed or listed, as well as the dietitian. We don't write diets or prescribe diets. We simply implement what has been given to us. And we have about 350 diets in the district that we are monitoring for a variety of issues for our student population, so that they can have a successful day and not experience prevention is our goal.
Yeah.
So by those diets and that implementation and adherence, we hope that they will get along fine and do very nicely and not have any problems.
Right. What are the majority of those diets that you work with? Does one mount up higher than the others in terms of just numbers of students you're working with that have special dietary needs?
Allergies and allergens are probably the biggest thing that we do as a group. And within that, we have milk intolerance is probably our highest, which varies in its degree of severity from just eliminating milk to a soy or a lactose-free to something to a diet that needs to have all milk products of any kind excluded. And then from there we have a variety from the nuts and the fish, kind of the top ones, if you will, in terms of allergies, but we do get more specific. We work very closely with the nurses in the buildings in terms of diabetics, so we're not really working a lot with those diets any longer because the menus are far more conducive to helping those kids pick and choose what they need to have on a daily basis. But we do then get into diet modification, parane, some things for very specific issues, failure to thrive, celiac sprue, gluten intolerances are things that we've seen more of also, and how do we implement and how do we work with those?
You just said pureeing and those types of things. So, I mean, we've done a fantastic job of integrating students who have trachs and just a variety of medical devices and equipment that come to us every day for school and do very well. And so I guess I hadn't even thought about that specifically, but there's some of that as well.
Sure, we have diet modifications that need to take place from various textures, from nectar-like to applesauce to chopped to whatever that we're working with. And so we have trained staff that handle that and manage that. We do have some blended diets that maybe each item is blended in a specific manner for that student's needs. And so yeah, people are often very surprised when we think of the scope of the students in our district, what some of those needs might be.
Yeah, that is incredible when you think about 24,000 students, and we're serving 18,000 food items are coming out of our whether you consider meals or breakfasts or snacks, are coming out every single day. That's a monumental task. Those foods.
Yay to staff.
Yeah, what's that?
Yay to staff.
Yay to staff, for sure, for sure. Some of those issues, like the milk intolerance and the nuts and things like that, we've become, in the last 5 or 10 years, we've become much more aware of those issues as well. What do the symptoms usually present themselves in a certain way that students or children are coming in, or parents are bringing kids in? Is it mostly that gastrointestinal kind of issue?
Yeah, it really depends on the allergy and the severity of the allergy. It could be anywhere from just kind of like a rash around the mouth to inside the mouth, or the throat starting to close, or swelling of the hands and face, to anaphylaxis, severe respiratory distress, with something like a peanut allergy or something like that. And so it really depends, but I think parents are pretty good at, when kids are young and those foods are first introduced, to kind of pinpointing it back to those foods and figuring out what's causing the problem, so that we can definitely start avoiding those things and not having those scary incidents happening. So.
And there are different types of allergies to foods also, where you're intolerant and may be for the rest of your life. My children were not great on milk, soy, wheat, and eggs. We were diagnosed early on those things, but have grown out of it, and that certainly can happen as well.
Yes, there are some that are more likely than others for kids to grow out of, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is actually really changing their thought on when kids are really young, infant age, and you start solid foods, that introducing those high allergen foods like Joni mentioned, like fish, eggs, nuts once they can chew, those kind of things, wheat, is actually helping to prevent kids from getting allergies to those foods.
So being more exploratory earlier?
Right.
I mean, as soon as they're capable of.
Yeah, a lot of those foods, they said you should really wait until they're 1, but most parents are introducing solid foods somewhere around 4 to 6 months, and so actually, once they can safely eat those kind of foods, trying to introduce them so that they're exposed to those allergens, if you will, and then build up antibodies to them and don't have those allergic reactions.
Okay, well that's, I mean, obviously they're the experts and the researchers.
Yes,
so
right, yeah.
That's interesting, I think we do see that in many different things, sort of peaks and valleys of what the thought is about how to, prevent, and where at one point in time we might say hold off on the introductions, then now it seems like there's a flip happening on the other side.
Yeah.
So
The research is always ongoing, that's
absolutely,
for sure.
Absolutely. So, and glad it is, because we benefit so much from that. Specifically, we talked a little bit about the nuts, and I know that is a concern oftentimes in our elementaries. And you prepare meals that do not contain nuts for the elementary. Is that correct Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. Coming out of our food service center facility, of which we can monitor, control, etc., we assure our community that we do not purchase or use items that contain nuts of any kind. So when you do that exploration of labels and what that could mean and how in depth that gets, it does exclude some things for us, etc. But that is the one thing coming from us that we have done, and we've taken that as far as some of our catering opportunities also because of that facility and the need to keep that pure and sanitized, and that's the protection part of what we do for our families and the safety we want to assure them. So for the elementary level, that's what we can assure of the meals and snacks, breakfasts coming out of that facility.
And when we say for the elementary level, that's because our middle schools and our high schools have food preparation sites on site, or how is that?
Yes, that is correct. Each of our middle schools and high schools have a self-operating kitchen, and so we can have, and we do have areas then where those special diets that we do have at that level are taken care of and monitored and produced there with all the same issues in regard to safety and sanitation and the kinds of things you want to do, so we don't cross-contact product and that kind of thing. But certainly at the food service center, that's, and then at those levels, pardon me, students a little older, the idea in working with the principals and nurses is that they have more understanding perhaps of things they need to watch and avoid and that kind of thing. We do have 2 middle schools that have had some students who still are sensitive enough to nuts and things that we don't allow those things coming from us. Again, so the a la carte item or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich be purchased from school lunch.
Right. This is really a challenge. You've been in food service for a number of years. How many years, Joni?
30 total.
Okay, 30. So it has to just be a sweeping change from those beginning days. Is it that, or were there a lot of special things you were following early on in your career as well?
Well, I think personally there was a level and a background that tuned me into a lot of things that in the menus that I've worked with in all those years in the programs, from WIC to public health, et cetera, that being a community feeding program, that there are things and you're looking out for the best health of those that you're providing care for. We were able and have always implemented things that were very true and monitored the sugar and fat and salt and that kind of thing, made conscious choices of the things that went on menus, whatever. So, but overall, yes, the entire industry has seen a huge change from just getting a meal out. What do the kids like? Peas, corn, or not peas, excuse me. The joke is one can of peas will feed 1,000 kids, but corn and potatoes. I mean, it's easy to do the menu that kids like, but you just can't. The variety, and then finding out what some of the issues are with some of those favorite menus or how you implement them, but not all the time. So yes, that's been the change. And then the more involvement specifically from USDA to say, you know what, we need to look at all programs. And is everybody making some of those choices and changes that we would expect our population to experience in the school realm? And so that's what's been a challenge for some of us, because maybe some of those changes hadn't happened and that kind of thing. And so that's understandable. Everything's changing, as you mentioned, with just research and understanding what all of us should be doing. And the program wants to be a reflection of what should be real life for everyone. But certainly there's been changes. And then not catering, pardon me, but working with our populations who have issues that we want them to come and enjoy and be just as, feel no different than anyone else. And so that certainly is a good thing that has come to us and asked us to do that and reflect on that and be sure that we can provide those services.
Right. I know that's one thing you guys do a lot of, is the customer care in terms of presenting foods to students that they're going to enjoy, and because they have to, it's their fuel for the day if they're going to continue to learn, and we want them to consume, but yet we have to provide that variety in order to meet the guidelines of that public feeding program and such. Oh golly, the challenges along with that. What would you say in terms of parents who might have a concern or might be noticing something with foods or what have you? Again, this is not something that we can accommodate just because your child doesn't like peas, which I'm shocked. I'm not a pea eater, but all 3 of my children will eat peas. So that's kudos to Dad, I guess, on that one. So, when somebody has a concern about, they really need to go to the doctor first, get diagnosed, that kind of thing, they don't come just directly to a school to make a change.
Right, exactly. Definitely, like Joni said, you know, don't just try to diagnose it on your own, you know, or, you know, like you were saying before, say it's an allergy when it's really just a dislike, you know, but definitely go to your doctor, because you know, it's no fun to have to cut anything out of your diet unnecessarily. So, you know, only if it really needs to be that. But kind of on another note, I think, you know, with the new changes, some of the concerns that I've heard from parents, or even just my older sisters who have school-age kids, is that they're throwing a lot of it away, or you know, they're hungry, and it's maybe because they don't like it, you know, or don't want to eat it. And you know, I think a lot of that comes back to trying to model that kind of eating at home, and so you know, they get used to it. You know, if they only eat the kind of foods that they really like but aren't necessarily good for them at home, then that's what they're going to want to eat at school. But you know, if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, you know, we all know that, you know, kids watch what we do all the time, and you know, whether we think so or not, they do model that behavior. So you know, offering those kind of foods at home too, I think, is really important in getting them to like them and be more open to trying new things.
Sure, and there is some selection process that can happen at the middle and high schools in terms of a student making a choice about, I want to eat this today or that today. And am I understanding correctly that you're dabbling in that a little bit at the elementary as well?
Oh, we've been trying to lay the groundwork to that. Sometimes a big system is a little challenging, but we have started with the vegetable choices right now. I'm thinking, you know, it'd be wonderful to have a salad bar in every building, but that necessarily is going to work. So we are making the opportunity for elementary schools to have choices available for the students so that they can work on that requirement that we have for vegetables, and so they can pick and choose, which always helps all of us if we have a choice. And then that, we hope, will lend itself to the fruit option also, and we need to be thinking more about entree choices, but that's another discussion that
right, you have
we'll be
to,
working
when
on.
you're working on the magnitude of meals that we do in a day. Just, you know.
One step at a time.
Right,
There
right.
you go.
But that choice, like you said, it feels good to someone, whether the choice is cooked carrots or peas. You know, maybe neither one is what you would choose. You know, if you had a pantry full of fruits and vegetables, or I guess even better yet, fresh fruits and vegetables that wouldn't be in a pantry. But you know, making that choice available is really a key issue too. So. We're coming up on the end of our time. I just want to give you guys an opportunity to, again, to sort of share any thoughts that we didn't talk about here in this conversation. Just again, encouraging families, if there is a concern, that they really need to follow the process and know that if they have a diagnosis, the school district will support them if they have all have taken the proper steps along the way. So any final thoughts you have, Jocelyn, about?
Just, you know, following up with what you said, I mean, you know, parents know their kids the best. So, I mean, if they have any kind of thought that, you know, they might be allergic to something, or, you know, something is causing a problem with their diet, because so many of the things we eat affect our lives in other ways than just, you know, how we feel. So to take those concerns to their doctor, you know, and not be afraid to say, hey, you know, I think this is going on. What do you think? And you know, get the test done to find out whether that really is an issue for them or not. And then again, just, you know, trying to understand that the work that the school is doing and the changes that they've made is really just to try to make the students healthier, and you know, the rest of us healthier too. And it's a challenge, but you know, they're doing the best that they can. So
Absolutely, absolutely, all for the right reasons.
yes, yes, exactly.
And Joni, what final thoughts do you have about you know, working with families? And certainly that's another step in those 350 diets, that the special diets that we do, but an important step, and one that we're we're committed to.
Very much so. And so just kind of playing on the very fact that we're fortunate that we have a group of a team of individuals from the hospitals to the dietitians to the nurses to teachers to parents, that we can all work together so that we can accommodate and to have our customers, no matter what might be their issue, be able to join us on a daily basis and experience school and lunch like everyone else.
Absolutely, that can be such a critical piece, not feeling like you're singled out or having something different just because you have an illness that causes a need for that. But the work you guys do is just amazing to me every single time we talk about it, just because it's so complex. We talk about it being the largest kitchen in Sioux Falls and that serves on a daily basis. And so it really is a complex issue and one that Joni and her team take very seriously. So we hope you've learned something here today on positive parenting in our conversation about special diets and the foods we eat and serve to our children. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day.